Today we're gonna talk about the newest 6-star Water Aurorian, the Thrill Seeker Ruby. Yes, this time around we are going to check out the second Aurorian, the second part of the Maiden in the Runes event brought to us. And Ruby is a quite interesting case, because she has to offer something very unique. And I'm not talking about these two hamsters with baseball bats, but instead about the fact that she is indeed the first 6-star version of an already established archetype in Alchemy Stars. And I'm talking about the cross-converter archetype, who is notorious for being one of the most powerful converter type if used properly and with enough resources poured into them. And when I say resources, it might as well also be cash, not only XP and Nightian. But is Ruby better than her already existing 5-star counterpart, or is she a bit lacking? And well, that's today's topic. That's what we are going to find out today. But before we actually do that, one quick reminder to join the Discord if you haven't already, link in the description down below, and maybe even think about becoming a channel member if you really like my content and want me to continue pumping out some Alchemy Stars content. But enough of that, without further ado, let's get right into this beauty. And no, I didn't mean it like that. You can put your bet away, and she is legal, by the way. So, with that cleared up, let's look at her skill set. And of course, we do have to start with her active skill, as this is the bread and butter of every converter in the game. And we do already have the usual expectations, because she is the 6-star upgrade of an already existing type of character. Of course, I'm talking about Barton in Water's case, which basically makes her, at the minimum, Booba Barton, and maybe even a slight upgrade if we're lucky. But let's get into the skill. Moonshot lets you, like the usual cross-converter skill, shoot out this max cross shape that deals damage and also knockbacks the enemy and converts every tile it goes through into blue ones. Here's the catch. In Ruby's case, because she is the 6-star version, you can actually change the shape of this skill from a cross to an X by just quickly touching her. And no, I'm not being indecent, that's exactly how it works. But X-shape, huh? Yeah, that doesn't work, chief. Not only is the X-shape kind of weird and not that usable, even though this makes her able to kind of coexist in the same space with Barton, as you can utilize the X-shape of Ruby and the cross-shape of Barton, it doesn't make that much sense. Not only because her stats aren't that great, so she isn't gonna deliver as much damage, possibly not even as much damage as Barton, and yeah, I don't think it's worth the trouble. So she is going to just stay an alternative to Barton, because there's no real application for the X-shape right now. We don't have any weird shaped enemies that you could make use of with this skill, so well, this extra addition is kind of nice, but not worth talking about. But what is worth talking about is the CD of the skill, because it's only 4, and if you have Barton in front of you, you will realize that his skill has a base CD of 5, making her skill at the base at least a bit better, which is the minimum you wanted out of the 6-star version, because yes, it's gonna cost a hefty price to at least get one copy of her. Even though 5 stars generally are a bit harder to get, at least multiple copies of them, getting one 6-star isn't too hard if you have a credit card. But besides that, we do need a bit more from this beauty, so her chain combo is sadly not exactly enough. It's a new type of chain. It hits the 2 nearest enemies but has disappointingly low scalings, but that's also for a reason, because there's a small addition to this chain that allows this chain to hit twice if there's only one enemy, meaning that you would like to use this versus, for example, a single tile boss. But aside from that, this isn't gonna do much. So maybe her equipment is a bit better. This lets her inflict extra damage equal to 3% of the target's current HP, but at least this damage has to be at least 150% of Ruby's basic defense, which as you can see is almost 1k. So that's not too bad, even though 1.5k-ish damage isn't anything great. And you only can trigger this every 3 times her chain combo deals damage to the same target. So it's very specific and once again emphasizes the fact that Ruby wants to go toe-to-toe versus a single target boss. Which is, to be fair, not the best thing. And well, we now cleared up what her skill set is and what it does, but now we have to check out in what kind of team you want to use her. Is she even worth using over an already existing Barton, and what are her advantages over him? So, let's get into her use cases. And well, this is quite easy. She's a cross converter, so you obviously want to use her for an OTK or burst team. For OTK, you obviously will need preemptive strike, which we are going to talk about later when we get to her breakthroughs. But yeah, she basically wants the same position Barton already has, making him her biggest rival by far. But to be honest, there isn't really any reason to pick her over him. Barton does not only have diagonal attacks, but also a way better chain in general. Because her chain is kind of specific and wants to go toe-to-toe versus the single target foe, while Barton has this semi-weird, usual cross-detonator chain, can be more useful in most scenarios. And her equipment isn't that much better either. This basically requires you to go off versus an opponent with a crazy high HP stat, meaning that Ruby can have some big damage potential versus hard content. But that's about it. Usually you can just use Barton over her, but that's only the case if you have preemptive strike, as preemptive strike is a key thing to every cross converter, because otherwise you have this really high CD, 5 for Barton and 4 for Booba Barton. But of course, this is not always the case, because we do have to look at her breakthroughs first. And she has the usual, not this time around, because her breakthroughs are actually quite different to the usual cross-converter one. Because, thankfully, Turtok showed some mercy to us and made her first PT preemptive strike. So this is actually a huge advantage for her, because if you want preemptive strike for her 5-star counterpart, you will have to get 5 additional copies. For her it's only 1, and getting only 1 additional copy of Ruby is going to be way easier than getting that many Barton copies. Even if he's gonna be on a rate up on an RRR, he's gonna share it with another 5-star, further decreasing your chance at getting him at all. So if you don't already have a 5-star MBT Barton, you might want to think about picking up 2 copies of Ruby if you want to make use of a burst or OTK team. But that's about it. That's her only advantage besides her slightly lower CD. And now let's get to her MBT. And this is honestly not that interesting. This only can allow you to change the direction of the push or pull. So you can actually also pull enemies now. But at what cost? At a whole month of hard work in your day-to-day job. So I don't think it's worth to throw all of that at this schoolgirl. And with that out of the way, let's bring this whole thing to an end. All in all, Ruby is a pretty decent converter. What can I say? She is basically just a slightly more interesting Barton. And I'm not only saying this because of her 2 overwhelming positive points. I am obviously also saying this because these 2 blue hamsters are threatening me with violence. But thankfully I have Mr. Dog to back me up, so they can't do me any harm. And now I'm gonna tell you outright that if you already have at least a BT2 Barton, then don't bother getting Ruby. Only if you are willing to get 2 copies of Ruby and you don't already have an MBT Barton, then you can actually make the decision to roll for her, otherwise it's not really worth it. At base, she's at best a kind of maybe slightly better BT2 Barton, but that's about it. Besides her visual appeal and her interesting animations and lovely companions, she doesn't offer anything great besides being able to kind of deal some okay damage versus high HP enemies and her quite interesting single target chain. But yeah, that's about it. Ruby isn't really worth your time, except if you're willing to plunder your bank account for her. If you are, for ambiguous reasons, willing to do that, then that's your thing. And like I said, if you don't already have a pretty well built Barton, then you might as well go after this Booba Barton beauty. So that's everything I wanted to say. One huge shout out to all of my channel members, and one extra huge shout out to the 2 hour VIPs of the channel, the Grand Warlock and Megawin. And that was all for today. Thank you so much for watching, have a nice day and see you next time.